What comes to mind when I say the word architecture? A block of concrete grandly titled a building, a complicated, intricate blueprint, bricks, cement. Now I ask you, what comes to mind when I say the word nature? Trees, I suppose, forests, mountains, plants, maybe even a river or the ocean. Now, ask yourself this. Did you think of all those trees when I mentioned architecture? I'm going to make an educated guess. No. And who can blame you? Architecture and nature are two separate things, so why would you think of them as one? My final question, for now, is this. Why must they remain separate? Why can't architecture and nature be one thing? This concept of architecture and nature being a part of each other is not as novel as it sounds. It has in fact existed for hundreds, dare I say thousands of years, and while it goes by many names, I like to call it living architecture. According to the Green Infrastructure Foundation, living architecture is the integration of living systems on or within a building envelope. This includes green roofs, living walls, and green facades. My own definition of it is this: any kind of architecture that can exist in harmony with nature. While this could literally mean blending the two, such as building a house around a tree or creating a wall from living bamboo, it also means using materials which don't negatively impact nature, such as reusing old shipping containers or parts from old buildings. After all, a bird does not cut down a whole tree just for one twig for its nest, does it? I can understand how this might be difficult to imagine, so allow me to help. In Meghalaya, India, the indigenous Khasi people have braided the aerial roots of the Ficus elastica tree across a river to create a living bridge. The oldest one is estimated to be about 500 years old and can hold up to 30 people. This truly is an amazing creation, isn't it? Don't brush it off, however, as a mere one-of-its-kind example. The Vine Bridge in Ina Valley, Japan, the Chane Chapel in France, Falling Water in Pennsylvania, the US, igloos of the Canadian Arctic Circle, even toadstool houses and fairy tales serve just the same purpose. And while some of these are ancient inventions, others are fairly new. It's understandable that you may be led to question the point of all this. Yes, living architecture is nice, but what does it solve? I think I can help you there too. While it wasn't designed with that specific intention in mind, living architecture solves the problem of, well, architecture. Don't get it? I'll elaborate. Have you ever stopped to think, wow, my house was made thanks to the sacrifice of the forests that lived here before me? It's all right if you haven't, but it's important that you do. Architecture. It's something that I have wanted to do for years, yet I haven't been able to wrap my head around how whole forests are razed to the ground, rivers are dredged of their sand, just to make way for us and our buildings. I remember that in our old house in Singapore, they had started constructing a train station right next door. I would look out the balcony every morning and see upturned soil. Because of this, all the snakes and monitor lizards that used to live there would be displaced and would find their way into our condo seeking a new home. They would then be found, caught, and sent away, or in the worst of scenarios, killed. I have never understood, and I still don't understand, why this has to happen. They lived there before us, and yet they're the ones being punished for it. Whole ecosystems are destroyed beyond repair so that we can be comfortable. It's wrong, and it's evil, and it has to change. This is why I came to choose living architecture for my quest project. It combined my love for architecture with my love for nature. All of this begs the question, what was I going to build? To be honest, I had started off with a very ambitious goal in mind. I was going to build a treehouse. Perhaps build isn't such a suitable word as grow. I had planned to plant bamboo in a large circle and shape it as it grows, creating a cone large enough for people to enter. I quickly realized, however, that this would only be slightly too overambitious for my quest project, so I instead decided to make a cat shelter. It would be the same designs, just on a much smaller scale. Well, now I knew what I wanted to build. All that was left was to actually build it, and for that, I would need to figure out how to shape plants. So I researched, and what did I find? Phototropism. When a plant is growing and its light source is not directly above it, it changes its shape to grow towards that light source. I thought that if I could manipulate this, it might just work to my advantage. So I consulted experts on this, and what did I find? My project was not going to work. Shaping a plant, even if it's one as malleable and fast growing as bamboo, takes much, much longer than the mere 6 months I had on my hands. Still, I remained adamant. I wanted my quest project to be like no other, the likes of which had never been seen before. So, I collected cuttings of a different plant and experimented, but neither this nor anything I tried seemed to work. By now, the term had ended, and I had next to nothing to show for it. I was lost, confused, and helpless. I had no idea where I was going, what I was doing, or what I would do when my papa told me to sit down and write. Write, he said, about living architecture. All my thoughts in it, why I chose it, why I love it, my hopes, my fears, everything. Saying that it would help clear my mind and clarify what it is I wanted to do. So I did what he said, albeit skeptically, and to my great surprise, it worked. I knew what I wanted to build. I had just never labeled it as living architecture. It was an idea that I had had for years that connected my love of nature and architecture to my love of books and reading. This idea of mine was a tree library. Picture this. Not a library, a tree surrounded by bookshelves so that all you have to do is select a book and climb up onto the tree to read it. As you can see here, my initial idea was to have a glass dome and large bookshelves for the protection of the books. I quickly decided that this would not be possible, so I instead decided to build bookshelves that incorporated safety for the books into it. My idea ticked all boxes. It was sustainable, it required reusing material, not getting fresh ones, and it was centered around a tree, so I immediately got to work. While I had got my idea ready and everything, one question lingered on my mind. Who was I going to build it for? To be honest, my design was for children who genuinely love climbing trees and who genuinely like reading. While the first one is easy to find here at Green School, to my great disappointment, the second one is not so easy. Reading isn't that popular at Green School. So, while I was at a loss, my sister, who's in grade 6, told me that her entire grade loves climbing trees, so that would be a good place to start. I came up with a survey and asked the entire grade, and while only a staggering 12 out of 25 of them actually wanted the library as compared to something else, I still worked with it and got the input I needed. Now that I knew what I wanted to build, the next step was to find a tree and accordingly make the designs. This gave me much, much more trouble than I would have liked. You see, these were technical drawings, as each piece had to be to scale. I decided that instead of building a whole building, I would create bits and pieces that came together to create the full library. I have never done these kind of drawings before, and I had to go with it. So after about an hour of frustrated erasing and scribbling, I managed to complete my designs. These were all just ideas. I didn't know which ones would work, but they were all in my head. I took them to the carpenters, and they told me which ones could work, which ones couldn't, and we started building. The first thing to be built was the swing. This was a popular suggestion among interviewees, so we got to work on it. It was actually relatively simple. It just required getting the top of an old table, some rope, and some cable, and we built it between the trees. While the swing itself wasn't that difficult to build, a problem I continually faced was random passerbys jumping on it and swinging. I tried to solve this problem by attaching a tether, made with more rope of course, to the ground, making it more of a hanging chair, therefore limiting how much you could swing on it. But I wasn't able to, as we had run out of rope. The next thing we built was the shelf, as you can see in the middle. The shelf was also made using the top of an old desk and some bamboo poles. While the building of this was not that hard, we had to build it just right so it fit around the tree, because it was centered around a tree. The building wasn't difficult, but the varnishing was much harder because I had to reach inside every corner with the varnish. After the shelf, we went on to the bamboo wall. Wall is a bit of a stretch. I had initially wanted to transplant bamboo to make like a full wall to give it more of a feeling of privacy in the library, but I wasn't able to. as it caused two problems planting them right next to each other. The first, if I planted them right next to each other, then the roots wouldn't be able to grow properly. And the second being that the cows had to pass through that area, therefore I couldn't fully use it. I substituted this by simply adding bamboo poles on the frames to make it more private. After this, we built the bench. The bench, as you can see on the right, I decided to build because in case you didn't feel like sitting on the floor or on the tree, you could sit on a bench. It wasn't hard, it just was very time consuming because we had to cut out each piece of bamboo and hammer it onto the bench. Then we also built a ladder because I had just managed to climb the tree, barely, and this design was for kids younger than me, so they would definitely have more difficulty than I had. The ladder, I'd have to say, was the easiest part of the build, seeing as it just required a bit of joinery. After all this, my tree library was finally done. Thank you. I finished it very last minute, just a few days ago, in fact. So it had taken lots of hard work, and it was by no means an easy task. There were challenges and struggles every step of the road, the biggest challenge I faced being the sheer size of it. You see, I had gotten so intimidated that the word quest flooded my stomach with butterflies every time I heard it. I had begun to question the point of quest. Quest to me had seemed like this endless void filled with hopelessness and despair that I would be trapped in forever. But now that I'm finally done with it, I'm looking back on it, I can see how much it's actually given me and how much I've learned from it. What I've learned about time management and communication, how to take help when I need it, how to tackle huge tasks one step at a time. I've even learned a bit about carpentry, as you can see. The most prominent thing I've learned, however, is about living architecture itself. You see, when I had started off this project, I was certain that living architecture has to be to create a building that is literally alive. My view is not now only limited to that. Yes, this is a part of living architecture, but it is also to create buildings that can exist in harmony with, possibly even benefit our Mother Nature. This has been a long voyage, and there have been many, many people that helped me on it. But I would like to especially thank Ibu Laura, Ibu Angie, Pak Greg and Pak Budi, Pak Kada Kantara, Pak Wayan Bono, and the entire carpenter team, my sister Ananya, my mama, and most of all my papa, who was there for me and helped me every step of the way. Before I leave, however, I'd like to ask you one last question. What comes to mind when I say the word architecture? If my speech has made an impact on you, I hope you aren't thinking of dull, gray cement buildings or blueprints, but the beautiful possibilities that exist within the realms of living architecture. This is the solution, but only if you remember it. So I implore you, don't let my speech be one which the impacts of only last until you get home, where you revert to your old habits. Actively think about living architecture and how you can do it, because the key to change is in your hands, but it's up to you to use it. Thank you.